Morbius pretty good. Cope and despair. You know what? That'll definitely not date this tier list. No, you know what? Here, I'll make it even more confusing. Instead of Morbius, I'll make it... Why are you trying to translate it? Alright, it is now Morgius tier. Perfect. Alright, whatever. Let's go with it. Okay, so in this GSSR, we can roll one of... What is this? I can't do math. How many servants is this? We can run one of a lot of servants. 21 servants. You can roll one of 21 servants. So we're going to decide which ones are the best and which ones suck some serious ass. All right, let's go. So first of all, let's start things off well. Squirturia goes straight into Morgius tier. That's because Squirturia is one of the few single target servants in the game that can just hard loop. She was arts looping before Castoria was a thing. As a single target. She is nuts. Just absolutely fucking bonkers, and for whatever reason they just gave her a buff. Not an NP damage buff, which is probably what they should have given her, but you know. Now she's even more reliable than before. Just give her a fucking battery to the servant that has no problem looping. Dude, I loop Berserkers with her. It's the stupidest thing. Okay, so that is where Castoria is. Castoria is Morgius tier. Same for Merlin. Merlin might not be like a super... like the super meta servant anymore, but he's still like really fucking good. You could use him in the Immortal team as your healer, and he's really good at it. If you really want to, if you're hell-bent on doing like some really specific crit strats, you could also just use him. So yes, really good. Now, this is like a start dash thing, right? So you unlock this as you go through Fuyuki. This whole start dash GSSR. And because of that, I'm actually going to put Nero Bride in Morgius tier. Not because she's like the greatest option for endgame players, because she's not. You just want Castoria for that. But if you get like a fucking loop enabler that early, that's pretty good, I'd say. Even if she is, like, by endgame standards, pretty antiquated. Okay. Now let's see what our other options are. Okay, so the question is, where do I put a Buster Looper like Ishtar? I'm thinking we start with pretty good tier and decide from there. Same for Gilgamesh, because pretty much wherever one goes, the other will be like pretty similarly placed. Because let's see, if memory serves, the difference is that Gilgamesh can output more damage, but Ishtar doesn't need a third charger. So you have the option of running a lower spec setup. Okay. Now let's think about the others. Because like, I want to put Dantes somewhere in pretty good tier, because he is in pretty good tier. He has the buff that makes him good. Because he operates in a pretty comparable way to Saber Okita Alter. Like, even though he's like locked to quick, which is a disadvantage, the fact that he's so good at what he does, I think, like, means that he still gets like points. Still falls into the good category. Scotty, that's true, but if you're trying to future-proof anyway, you have the option of headhunting for specific supports. Scotty as a new player, I think that's a very short-sighted way of thinking about it. Like, if there are servants with immediate power, that's a plus, and that should be weighted positively on this list. But I think just because a servant's part of an endgame setup doesn't mean that they're like, you should rate them lowly for a new player. Because you could hold on to that servant and just keep them around for later, until you can actually roll the servant you want. There's value in that. That's why I'm also going to put Illya probably, like, I'm going to put her one step above Dantes, because she is, like, the single target buster, like, buster burst caster. Especially once she gets her battery. Well, really once she gets her battery. I don't think she has it yet. Like, right now, Xuanzang is probably better for that purpose, but once she gets that buff, Illya is pretty, it's going to be a pretty strong hitter for that. She does have it? Why didn't I see it? Am I going insane? Well, if she does have it already, then yeah, never mind, she's good. Oh, it's with this update, that's why. So yeah. Okay, so our high-end potential loopers go in pretty good tier so far. So we got to decide who's Cope and who's Despair. Actually, wait, you know what, chat? Hold on. Give me a second. Let me see how this looks on screen. Give me a second. You don't see anything, chat. All right, how does this look? All right, looks like shit. God damn it. All right, here, I'll just have it off to the side then. I made it a little too tightly bound to the tier list format. All right. Oh, wait, you can see stuff on the bottom now. What happened? Oh, this is a disaster. Looks like ass. Hold on. There we go, chat. No one needs to be the wiser. It's been like that since the start. I set it up so that it didn't show at the start. Man. All right, dissolve. You have to wait for the curse catalyst. I can't mess around with my setup too much at the moment. All right, so let's talk about Iskandar, right? Iskandar is always like, because back when I started, back when he came out, right? Iskandar was a star-hungry, charge-hungry, extremely needy burst DPS. He used to have like 2 one-turn skills, now he just has 1. But even then, I don't regard him that highly, just because he needs so much support for what is effectively like a one-and-done. Like rider that just sort of drops an AoE NP and just spends the rest of the time face carding. So I'm going to say Despair. Just because he's a very one-dimensional character. He doesn't scale that well into endgame applications, and as an early player, like you really want... Like what you really want is either Koyanskaya or like some consistent source of star generation. And you're not exactly going to be running around with 2030. So, like, my question is, in what situation do you want Iskandar in? And I'm thinking none. All right. Next up, we have... Rootin' Tootin' Shootin' Doji. Oh, boy. Poor Shuten. I like all right to servants, but that doesn't mean I think they're particularly great. So Shuten has a 30% battery. You might think, oh, art servant, 30% battery. We need some farming assassins, right? 1 at Noble Phantasm. And what she does is she just spams out a bunch of random debuffs. She doesn't really spec hard into any one debuff. And even though I believe she has either the highest or the second highest attack, like raw attack stat, of all assassins. I don't know how Tezcat ranks in that front, because I think like Shuten has a higher base attack than First Asan. Let's see. So Tezcat caps out at 10.9. Shuten is at 11.9. Yeah, so Shuten wins out. But in practice, like if you're trying to face card enemies to death, you're gonna get more mileage out of First Asan, just because of the way he operates. So in practice, you don't get quite as much money as you would hope. I like Shuten, but she is... I'm gonna put her at top of despair for now. I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to give Shuten a leg up just because I like Ride to Servant so much. Better than Iskandar by like a country mile, but you know, I question whether I could put her in Cope tier. All right, next up, who do you want to see next, guys? I'm thinking we give Bryn a visit. Okay, so what does Bryn have? She has a one-hit mana burst NP damage combo. Or not one hit, sorry, one turn combo. She has a second skill buff, so she has a 30% battery now. That's something. Debuffs on it, that's alright. Reducing NP damage doesn't count for shit. That doesn't help. Targeted star absorption crit damage buff, that's not so bad. That's a really big absorption buff, 3k. 3k targetable isn't too bad. OG Saber? OG Saber is a general pool servant. This is all limited. I think if I could ascribe value to Bryn, it would be in that targetable
Use the magic
buff.
bong, now glance upon my magnum dong.
No, I will not grow up. Damn you. Like, star absorption on NP is kind of whatever. Loved one damage, I think, is a little gimmicky. I will put her in... I'm willing to put Bryn in Cope tier for now, like the bottom of Cope tier. Mostly because of that third skill buff. If she didn't have that third skill buff, I would say she's like trash tier. But right now, Cope tier. Alright, fine. Let's take a look at fucking Cleopatra. Alright. So, Imperial Privilege, alright. Automatic demerit for Imperial Privilege. Let's see. So, NP gain buff. Multi-turn NP gain buff, 3 turns. That's not so bad. I can see why people make the Ushi defense for her. You know, in this hypothetical, weird, like, fucking Willy Wonka world where you could just leave Cleopatra on the field alone to Mighty Chain forever. You know, 1k heal per turn doesn't count for shit. It's not important. 1 turn invuln is something. That's alright. With a star dump. And I kind of feel like you'd want to use this. You'd want to hold the invuln, so you wouldn't really get that much mileage out of the star dump. Alright, upgraded NP is buff block. Buff block's okay, but like, I'm not super impressed with having buff block on a Buster Noble Phantasm for a servant with a non-abusable battery. You know what I mean? Like with Jalter, at least I could see the use, because there is at least one really significant self-buffing ruler out there that you want to screw over with Jalter's buff block, but with Cleo's, I don't really see it. Ooh. I personally would put Cleo in Despair tier. She's AoE. Cleo's AoE. Oh, I understand now. I understand now. The reason why this keeps extending is because I keep removing servants. It's like Jenga. That's why I have to see Mash's face constantly. Alright, fine, we'll deal with it. We'll just leave it as is. Yeah, I'll put Cleo in Despair tier. I think that the upside of trying, like this hypothetical upside where Cleo is just sitting around, she hits both of her Imperial Privilege buffs, she starts getting like face card loops and spams her buff block, and somehow survives from her 1 turn invuln and her like 1k heal. It's a little optimistic. And by a little, I mean it's extremely optimistic. I don't know if she's worse than Shuten. I'm just putting her below Shuten out of spite. But I do not have very high regard for Cleo. And despite that, for a time, she was probably one of the best AoE assassins that we had. They didn't get around to fixing that till recently. Well, the assassin class, I mean. All right, let's see. Who do we touch for next? Color viable in a Willy Wonka world, aka pure imagination? True. Oh, you want to see Shiki Ryogi? Hold on. Shiki sucks, man. Alright, so Shiki is an AoE art saber with a one-hit Noble Phantasm. So her NP does two really cool things. It ignores defense, and it cleanses your whole front line, which is nice. But these are effects that you would really want to spam, especially that cleanse. If she had a spammable cleanse, that would be abusable. That would be really cool. And I think she might actually see use. But she also has preemptive insta-kill on her NP, so you can't really farm with her, even if she somehow magically had like a 5-hit NP or something. Oh, speaking of Shiki, if you want to hear something funny, I was using Assassin Shiki to try and farm the that one hunting quest, the rider hunting quest, where sometimes the middle enemy gets replaced with a magical stick. It was misery, dude. For whatever reason, the Elder Ghoul had just enough of a death rate, despite being a gold enemy, to where Shiki would sometimes insta-kill him and get 0 charge back. And then the rune would be scuffed. I didn't realize that until I was like trying it a couple of times. It's the stupidest thing. So thank you for the 31 months, Slime Dog Millionaire. Crying with my Shuten pull. At least now she's new on my... At least she's new on my roster, I guess. Listen, Shuten, cool character. Gameplay-wise, not the best deal. Let's see. Like, what else does Shiki have? She has like a 1-turn, like, Arts Invuln Pierce. 3-turn attack buff. I think they got rid of the part... Oh, no. Wait a second. So she still drains 10% charge, but now she can punt that off onto someone else? But it's a targeted heal and a self-charge with 30%. Why would... I don't understand why they would make the upgrade for Saber's Shiki so jank. I don't really get it. Like, so I guess the contention is that she's supposed to be like this survival assassin, survival AoE party utility assassin. So here's my thinking, right? Like, maybe the original concept of the character is that you could run her with someone like Tamamo, right? And if you're fighting a boss where your insta-kill doesn't matter anyway, you would just like try and get her face cards to get her to full NP. So you would like cleanse off debuffs. You'd have Tamamo for a party heal and CDR. But like, I'm thinking, what reason is there to do that now? Because if you need, like, party protection... If you need party protection and to have your buffs cleansed off, you'd really just run Castoria. So I'm thinking that's despair tier. You know what, I'll give her a leg up above Shuten. Why the hell not? She at least has, like, arguable utility. Alright, so now, who shall we look at? Let's take a peek at Da Vinci. Da Vinci? Oh yeah, hold on a second. Chat made a great point. Shiki's Noble Phantasm has a Kara no Kyokai song playing during it, and it will actually take down... Well, it won't take it down, but you'll get copyright claimed if you try and upload that to YouTube. So, as far as, you know, doesn't really affect the tier list, but in my personal, for my personal usage, that's a -1. Alright, let's see. So, back to Da Vinci. Good old Leo Da Vinci. So with the upgrade, I don't think there's any more chance-based buffs after she gets her upgrade. Personal arts buff after that upgrade as well. Debuff immune. A lot of utility on this character. You know, the Invuln you guys got to be on the receiving end of that during Nero Fest, huh? So in a hypothetical situation where Da Vinci shows up with a break bar and like 300,000 health, should be pretty good, I guess. Let's see. Damage buff. Here's my thinking. One-hit Noble Phantasm. Even with defense ignoring, that's still a one-hit Noble Phantasm. On an Arts Servant. That, as far as I recall, does not hit terribly hard in the first place, even with all those buffs. So my thinking is that despite Da Vinci having so much utility, running Da Vinci means that you spend so much more time in a fight that you kind of lose out on the benefits of having like that extra utility or that survivability. Because opting into a Da Vinci run means that you will take like twice as long to kill something. At least that's the impression I got from when I tried using Da Vinci. So I'm gonna go with Cope tier on Da Vinci. Because despite everything, that's still a 50% battery on her kit, and that counts for something. Because here's my thinking. Early game, a 50% battery means you can kind of get away with some like scuffed multi-attacker like monster mash kind of setup. And you do have access to Invuln Pierce, Defense Ignore, Debuff Immune, Targeted Overcharge. Like that's, I think the utility is what keeps Da Vinci out of Despair tier. But Da Vinci is not a good servant. And I think your account's going to outgrow Da Vinci pretty fast. But in the interim, like I could see Da Vinci being like sort of a band-aid for team building early on. All right, so that's Da Vinci down. Who shall we pay a visit to this time? How about Tamamo Lancer? Okay, so Tamamo Lancer. Has Tamamo Lancer's NP ever been upgraded? It has not. Holy shit. So a single target Buster Servant. Anti-Male Niche, that's fine. Let's see. Upgraded third skill actually does have a battery. 30% battery, that's something. That's a lot of buffs. That third skill actually is not that bad. So what, like a crit? Buster crit kind of Lancer with an anti-Male Niche. The second skill is pretty special. Like the targeted guaranteed charm and like enemy charge accelerate. That is a very interesting skill. One with some really weird applications. Like we saw that against Arash in Nero Fest. So there's weird stuff you could do with the character. That's pretty rare. But overall, like I would not feel great about having to use Tamamo Lancer as like an actual mainline DPS. Which means the question is Cope or Despair. I'm thinking Cope. Because even at a low NP level, you could still utilize the crit part of her kit. She has utility with that guaranteed charm. enemy charge acceleration is like a rare niche, but a very like its uses are rare, but like servants that have it are even rarer. So I think that counts for something. So let's go Cope, bottom of Cope tier, below Da Vinci. Actually, you know what? I'll put her one above Da Vinci because even though they are extremely niche uses, the uses that Tamamo Lancer has, I think, will last longer than the ones... Like, because you could find replacements for Da Vinci sooner than you could find replacements for Tamamo Lancer. So I'll say middle of Cope for the time being. Let's see, Fabulous 23 says, Male isn't a niche, it's like half the enemies in the game. That's true, but consider this. There are only so many fights in the game where you would opt for a specific, like, anti-male or female character over just using the most, like, generically strong attacker you have. Unless there's specific utility tied to... Like, tied to the anti, like, that particular anti-trait. At least for male and female, right? Because when I think of, like, situations where it's been relevant in gameplay, I think of ones where you just, like, stun lock them with Uriel, or charm lock them, really. And she does extra damage to them as well, if memory serves, but, like, that's... The primary reason is you can just lock them up forever. Dick kick is pretty strong. All right, next up, let's pay a visit to... Oh, you know what? Let's say Raikou. So, Raikou is like, if memory serves, even with her upgrade. Even with her upgrade, I'm pretty sure she's a distant third on, like, the Buster... Like, Vich compatible, like, Buster totem pole. So that's decent. Because remember, she still does a shitload of damage. She does a bunch of damage. With her upgrade, she'll have a multi-turn Buster buff. She has self-protection, even if it's for only one turn. She has anti-trait damage. If those become relevant, then you start getting some, like, pretty big hits. It's a wide niche. I'd have to look up the spreadsheet, but for whatever reason, the spreadsheet's broken on Brave right now. Yeah, she has the Lancelot benefit of shitting out a ton of stars. And having, like, a crit build as well. So early game, pretty damn good. Let's see, she has an upgraded NP, so that also counts for something. Oh wait, when did the upgrade NP come out? Or NP upgrade come out? When was this? Strengthening Quest Part 12? Part 12. August 2022. Okay, so those have been out for, like... Or sorry, 2022. So they've been out for around a year. So thank you for the 50 bits, Grey Wolf. You get Raikou as your mom, and thus is awarded extra points. You know what? Fair play. And King Draconius, thank you for the 51 months. So let me think about this. With all the buffs, so like what? She operates in a similar ballpark to Jeanne Alter, especially now that she has a battery. How high do I rate Raikou? Actually, here, you know what? I'm gonna try and get a little sciencey on this. Let me see if I can open the spreadsheet on Chrome. Gotta open up Chrome for this shit. So for the sake of argument, I'm just gonna assume one trait. Okay, so let's see. So if either or means comparable damage to Jeanne. Like either earth or sky or demonic. And when you get combinations of those two, or of those three, then you start seeing higher numbers than Arjuna. So you know what? I think that counts for something. I'm going to say bottom up pretty good. Actually, you know what? I'll put one above... one above Eddie. I think one above Eddie is too much. Because how do I figure this out? So Raikou is part of a more relevant system when you're using her. But, like, Dantes has some pretty good utility. Like, if memory serves, he has his, like, buff purge on hit, doesn't he? It's a pretty good utility. Or, no, buff purge on crit. Yeah, that's right, it's on crit. For now, I'm going to place her below Dantes. Doesn't Raikou not get her battery for 2 years? That's true, but if you roll Raikou now, you could use her now, even without the battery. And she'll grow into that sort of power level. So I think accounting for future upgrades is valid for this tier list. Dantes can buff purge? Yeah. His second skill gets an upgrade that lets him buff purge on critical hits. I think it's like this. It's single buffs, so it's like one buff per crit. But that's still pretty good. Team-based one or individual? I'm looking at the individual one. Okay, now before Cog gets here, let's look at Scathach. Scathach. Oh, does she still have chance-based buffs? Disgusting. 80%, but still. Man, imagine losing a 50% crit buff on a 20% like dice roll. So targeted quick buff, 20% charge. Received buff success rate? That's such a weird effect. Oh, she puts it on herself? So why don't they just buff her first skill then? What the fuck? Alright, so one turn massive spike against divine enemies and undead. Undead one doesn't really matter. Outside of a few really specific fights. Because usually when they make undead enemies, they're like shitty little jobbers. With the occasional like giant ghost or something. I don't know if giant ghosts are undead. I'm pretty sure they are. Given the whole ghost thing in their name. And let's see. So, big damage on NP. So, Scathach... Yeah, okay. So, just like I remember, Scathach is like a really... It's like an all-in burst damage character. A one-pump chump. Now, how much stock can I put in massive single-turn damage? With, like, very little longevity after that. Massive single turn damage. I mean, the damage is massive. Memory serves. Like what? Second highest non-trait damage after Enkidu. I think that you know what? I think that's Cope. I'm gonna put her with the other Lancers right now. Did every Lancer end up in Cope tier? Holy shit. Heroine Lancer is not the greatest bunch. All right. Now let's look at Amakusa. So Amakusa Shiro has a preemptive AoE no strings attached buff purge at the cost of running a potato servant. With really weird buffs. Ooh, 20%. 20% battery, huh? So close and so far. She has like the weird stun like Jeanne does. Or he has the weird stun, rather. But at least it gets upgraded to have a buster buff, so it's not completely useless. I'm going to say Cope. I'm going to say Cope, and I'm going to put him a peg above Da Vinci. And here's my reasoning, right? So preemptive AoE buff purge. Preemptive AoE buff purge is useful, and there are some fights in like early to mid game FGO, like at least up until Lost Belt 3, where you could find uses for him that other servants can't easily meet. Some of them you can, but like specifically for that fight, that really annoying fight in Lost Belt 3, where you have to fight like the dudes that have a ton of buffs on them, but like no health. Like that's where he peaks. And after that, it's just kind of been downhill for Amakusa. But having buff purge at all is, I would say, a pretty big improvement to a new account. Then you can use ruler class advantage to kind of like just sort of face tank your way through fights. It's not ideal, but I think there's enough value there to merit Cope. A lot of buffs are hard-coded. A lot of the fight-defining buffs are hard-coded, but you do get enemies that have like spammable effects or buffs that generate more buffs. So I think buff purgers even now have some usage, so they're worth keeping around. All right, so we're down to our final four, chat. Who do we pick next? We got Okita Souji. We have Mysterious Heroine X, Kintoki, and Jeanne Alter. Ooh, you know what? Let's do MHX. So MHX has actually gotten a shitload of buffs over the years. And I think, like, in terms of raw damage output, she's actually really high on the list. See, how much of that damage is based on one-turn buffs? Okay, so even without traits, I think her raw damage is higher than Kama, although it's not by enough to, like, justify losing a 50% battery, but still, that's the ballpark we're talking about. She's gotten so many buffs that she can actually, like, keep pace raw damage with Kama. And get really high damage with trait advantage. So again, you have the anti-saber niche. Her defensives are a little scuffed. I mean, she at least has an invuln, so that's something. The whole delayed stun thing, I'm not a big fan of. Just having that as a one-and-done skill. But, you know, it is there. 12 hit Noble Phantasm. You know what? I'm going to put MHX in pretty good. I'm going to say bottom of pretty good. Like under Raikou. But still pretty good. What do you guys think? Is that fair? Because I think being a potential substitute Kama is pretty good. All right. Now let's look at Kintoki. Actually, no. You know what? We'll save Kintoki for last. I like him. All right. Jalter. Jalter. Beatstick Crit Avenger. The OG Avenger. The one that led to the first big... how would I describe it? The first big rage quit moment in FGO NA. When all the people that were hyping her up and saving all their cores for her failed to get her and then quit the game. Good times. Buster buff being tied to her invuln and only lasting for a single turn is a little rough. But again, you can get those buffs elsewhere if you really need to. Buffing Dragon Ally is not the most relevant thing in the world. They can do some funny memes with it. Buff block on NP. So Jalter's real deal is you hit someone with an NP, and ideally that limits their ability to fight back. They can just start critting the shit out of them. And for a while, Jalter was like the OG Super Orion. People used her in that role because she could output like huge crit damage. Obviously, nowadays you'd much rather use actual Super Orion for that, but she's a single target face card oriented beatstick. How good is that? So at minimum, that puts her at, I think, at the top of Cope. The question is whether that pulls her up to like pretty good tier, like bottom of pretty good or top of Cope. She can make her own stars? That's true. She does dump out 30 stars on NP. I think she's better than MHX for a new account. Not below MHX. I think you're underselling MHX. Okay, so we're working with high base attack, neutral class usage. Shit, man, this is hard. So I guess the question is for me, is Jeanne closer in quality to MHX or Bryn? Actually, now that I put it that way, I'd probably say closer to MHX than Bryn. You're underselling highest attack stats. That's the highest attack stat that you're using without class advantage. In like most situations. But yeah, for the sake of argument, let's say pretty good tier for now. All right, so we have two left. Okita Souji. Oh, fucking boy. Let's see. So Okita kind of has like a Scathach problem, where she's a one and done servant. Like, I'm looking at her magnitudes, and they're all, like, one-turn effects. Well, you know, oh no, crit damage is 3 turns. Crit damage is 3 turns. One of them. The other crit damage is 1 turn. And she has like that really weird quick buff where you have the conflicting incentive of using it as a mana burst or using it on a Brave Chain turn to get the stacking attack buff. The stacking attack buff only lasts for 1 turn, so it'll expire by your next turn. If I'm understanding this correctly. You ignore defense on NP, and you have defense down on NP. Like, that was useful for Leonidas. Or the Leonidas exhibition quest. I remember that. Oh, you got NP5 Tamamo Lancer, Soma. Rest in peace. I think it would be unfair to put her on a tier that's not the same as Scathach's. Because they are, in many ways, the same servant. Except that Okita does better against hardened targets. And Scathach murders soft targets. So I'm thinking I would put Okita at the top of Cope, which I think is that is like the quintessential Okita placement. And now we come to the big boy, Mr. Kintoki himself. So, pluses. Kintoki is a big dick Chad that has a 50% battery and a defense ignoring NP as a buster servant. Which means you can use him if you want to as a Vich compatible single target attacker. Downside is he has 1 borderline useless skill and an attack buff that desperately needs a buff because it lasts for 1 turn. So he has no protection, so you gotta shield his ass, something Vich is woefully unprepared to do, unless you want to run some Tonsi-E's. I love this guy, but he absolutely has his share of drawbacks, so suffice to say he's not gonna end up in Morgius tier. Now I use him as like a single target destroyer, even in farming teams. I don't know how much that counts. Yes, he is one of the best anti-raid servants. That's true. So I'm thinking, just based on his damage output, and the fact that you could spam Golden Spark, even though you won't have your attack buff for all of them. Because, like, how do I put this? Like, so if our argument is that Jalter is good, because she's useful as, like, extremely useful as an early game beat stick, with some, like, with some late game applications as a single target, by that same logic, like, Kintoki should be in pretty good tier. The question is, where in pretty good tier does he end up? So I would put on account of his 50% battery, I would probably put him above Jalter. Now the question is, does he rank above MHX or below MHX? Because I don't think I would put him above Raikou. He has charge. It's true, he is a generalist as a berserker. It's true, he is a generalist attacker. Wait a second. Shouldn't he be close to Illya since they're comparable as single target buster attackers with batteries? That is an interesting point. Let me look at Illya's numbers real quick. So yeah, Illya has the highest. She has the highest base NP, like NP damage of all casters. How does Toki rate in the field of berserkers? Kintoki is also the high. You know what? We're not so different, you and I. Hey, Liz, thank you for the 49 months, good sir. Oh, man. Let me think about this. Okay, so let's say I would put him above MHX. Sure. Illya gets worse NP. Technically speaking, Kintoki also gets worse after his first NP. Because you have to use his attack buff and it doesn't linger. I want Kintoki to have guts. I want him to have an invuln. No, you know what? I want him to have Kukulkan's kit. How about that? Just give me all of Kukulkan's shit and like put it on Kintoki. How about that? Free stars, fucking anti-enforcement defense. There you go. There, that's my Kintoki buff. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, I think I'll stick with this for the time being. Like we could quibble about like the middle four of pretty good tier. So I think there's arguments for moving Illya, Dantes, Raikou, and Kintoki around in that sort of segment. But otherwise, I think this tier list looks pretty solid. What do you guys think?